Well, hey there, Sarah. Thank you so much for joining me today for the Confident Sober Women podcast. I'm so glad that you're here. I'm going to let you share a little bit more about your story now, and then we're going to chat.
Awesome. Shelby, thank you so much for having me on your show and congratulations on all your success. It's not easy to have a show, especially, with all the editing and all the things that go into it that most people don't realize. So I just want to give you some kudos on that. And I appreciate you for having me on the show. I mean, my journey started a long time ago. I've been in logistics and supply chain for about 25 years. My dad owned a logistics company, so it was a family business, went straight into that business and worked there for about 20 years. And back in 2016, I started my podcast.
Mm.
And it was kind of around the time where people were only just getting into podcasts. Marketing and supply chain was not very good. I was director of sales and marketing at that point, and I was like, we need to be able to tell our brand story, which I think is, kind of the starting point for a lot of people with podcasts and things like that too. So I asked a gentleman from my customs department to be my co-host, and tongue in cheek, we called it Two Babes Talk Supply Chain. Because I wanted to see how far we could push the industry and see, what people would accept and what they wouldn't accept and all that kind of stuff. But literally almost, I think it was just over a year later, it was 10 days before my 37th birthday. My dad ended up closing his doors. And I was out on my butt because I don't know if we can swear in this one.
Sure.
I was out on my butt with nowhere to go. I had no team, I had no co-host, but I had people paying to come on the show. And so I was like, okay, I've got an obligation here. I've lost everything. I don't feel like getting up out of bed, but I have an obligation to these people who have paid to keep it going and to figure this out. So I had to learn graphic design, social media, website design, you name it, had to do all of that. And then in January 2018, I started the Woman in Supply Chain series on the podcast. And by April, no women would come on a show called Two Babes Talk Supply Chain. So I had to rebrand it. And I rebranded it within a week, craziest week of my life, to Let's Talk Supply Chain. Fast forward from there, now have a team of almost 18 people. We create a lot of digital content within the supply chain community. And we now have a second podcast called Blended, which is about inclusion in the workplace, and a nonprofit that gives grants so that we can cover travel expenses to see more inclusion on industry stages. So lots have like developed since then. And then I think, when it comes to my personal brand, I just released a book. And that was a whole journey on its own because I went to a workshop and they were like, your personal brand needs to be about one word. And I was like, I have no idea what that's going to be. But I also didn't want to be a supply chain expert. So that kind of was the beginning of the trajectory of me talking about self-worth and the book being about my relationship with self-worth. So, yeah.
Wow. Thank you so much for sharing all that. And that is quite a journey. I must admit, I don't know much about supply chain, so that's
It's
definitely not
okay.
my area, but I certainly do understand and appreciate the kind of perseverance and blood, sweat, and tears and stick-to-itiveness that it takes to build a business and to be an entrepreneur because it is not for the faint of heart.
It is not.
The emotional
No.
roller coaster that happens when you're trying, really when anybody's trying to do anything, let's face it, right? You've written a book, so you know you've done that. Like if you're an artist and you're doing creative work, if you're a chef and you're trying to get a five-star restaurant, I don't know, whatever you're trying to
Hmm.
do, it's hard. Nothing worth doing is easy. And so, but I think entrepreneurship has its own kind of unique area, right?
Yeah.
Because you just are on your own. Like even if you have a team, like you're still so responsible for so many things, and you're also the one that is responsible for, giving yourself your own kudos, right? You're you're
Yeah.
you're giving yourself your pat on the back. You're the one saying,
Hmm.
keep going, even then when all arrows seem to be pointing to like don't go, and you're like, but I'm getting this message that says keep going. I mean, that's where I was several years ago, and I was like
Yeah.
up and down, up and down. And I'm like, how much more can I take? The heart. But, it does take a long time. And most people who are successful, what do they say? It takes like 7 years or something for things to become,
Hmm.
kind of,
Yeah. At
branded.
least.
Yeah, at least.
Yeah.
And that's a long time to stick with something and talk
Mhm.
about self-worth. I mean, I know for sure I've had many times where I was at the bottom of the barrel even and where I never really didn't didn't think I had self-worth. I mean, when I was in active addiction for sure in the early stages of recovery, I know exactly what that looks like. But
Yeah,
as I've been sober for a long time, but in business building, that shows up and you're like, dang, why isn't this working? Or I'm doing all the things that the professionals are telling me to do and it just isn't taking off.
right.
It can make us question our own value, our own purpose, what is all this for? And it
Mhm.
makes a lot of people quit.
Yeah. Yeah. I actually talk about purpose in the book because I think we get so caught up in the fact that we have to have purpose that it
Mhm.
actually diminishes what we're here to do and like to actually enjoy the journey. Some
Mhm.
of the things that you were talking about, I've had several businesses, right? I think they say you have to have like nine for the 10th one to, so there's all these rules, right? You have
Right.
to have nine for the 10th one to take off. You've got to be
Uh,
doing it for 7 to 10 years before, you're the overnight success or whatever that
right.
looks like.
Right.
And there's all these things. And then we don't necessarily enjoy the journey. And part of that journey is to try things. And I don't want to use the word fail because fail is so negative, but try things and then they don't work out. But it not working out is not necessarily always the bad thing.
No. Well, there's the messy middle, I always call it. Like,
Yeah.
if you're here and you want to be here, I think somebody did a really brilliant, someone with a PhD, something, did a brilliant Instagram reel or something about this, but she was teaching it in a college class, I think. And it's like this in between is the perseverance,
Right.
that messy middle where you have to decide on a very regular basis. I get up and I show up and I do this thing and I go
Hmm.
and I keep doing it. I get up and show up. And even though all signs are pointing to no, you're still doing it. Even
Yeah.
when all the people in your family or your community or your business are saying, you're stupid. Why are you doing that? That's never going to work. You still have to get up and show up and do the thing.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
that is really hard.
Yeah. It is really hard. And for the first 3 years of my business, I didn't pay myself and I worked two part-time jobs.
Right.
Like I was a part-time receptionist at a tennis club and I was mopping floors. Like I went from director of sales and marketing to mopping floors, but that job allowed me to work on my business.
Right. I think that's what also is very under talked about. Like it's definitely not something people really realize. Like I'm building my group practice right now. Holistic living is expanded into a group, which is
Awesome.
amazing and it's been awesome. And I've spent, over a year researching how to do that before I even like stepped
Hmm.
into trying things. But um it's a humbling experience in many ways. And I'm still seeing my own clients. Like I'm seeing my own clients to fund my business so I
Right.
can bring on new clinicians, get them going, working for and with me to serve our
Mhm.
community, right?
Yeah.
Because yeah, we do have a greater purpose. Our vision
Yeah.
is my vision for this practice is humongous, is really to serve people and treat their trauma and their mental health in a
Love
neurologically
that.
based way, and to heal them below the surface. So we do have very clear mission, vision, and values. But you have to wait. You have to
Yeah.
wait. You have to have a
Well, and
lot of
then you're
patience.
and then you're relying on other people, right? You're bringing other people in, and that can also bring some complexity as well because they need to be the right people. And
Oh.
just because they don't work out does not mean they're bad people.
Right.
It
Well,
just
that's what
means
I
that
meant
they
to say
don't
that
work
about the
out
failure
for
piece. Like,
this.
yeah, like when you said it's a failure, we go to church. We're a Christian family, and we go to church regularly. And the message yesterday was about consistency, right? And
Hmm.
like one of the things that he talked about was um, was failure. Like that you have to almost expect it. Like you have to.
Yeah.
That is feels like a dirty word, but it is there. But it doesn't actually have to be failure because if you can change your perspective on that, even just slightly, and you might not be there the first minute it happens, but you do need to get there to be able to
Yeah.
see like, oh, you were in this messy middle part. This thing didn't work, but then it led you to this, or then
Yeah.
you tried this, right? Like you mentioned.
Yep.
And so nothing, I tell I have young adults and I always say them too, like none of this is one of them was really struggling with like the internship she was going to choose last year. And she was like, I just don't want to choose the wrong one. And I said, honey, none of them are wrong.
No.
I don't care if you
Yeah.
hate it. It'll still be the right thing for you because now you don't like that. You don't
Yes,
like that thing. So
exactly.
it's none of them are wrong. But she
Hmm.
kept so focused on like, I just don't want to choose the wrong one. I'm like, but you're missing it. You're missing the point. None of
Yeah.
them will be wrong.
Yeah.
They just might not be the right one for you. And you'll learn that because
And
you chose.
also in this moment, I
Right.
mean, you're changing all the time. What you want in your 20s versus what you want in your
Oh,
30s and your
yeah.
40s are going to look completely different.
Yeah.
And that path to get there and that path that you're going to be on, it's all of these things are pebbles that are going to build up your character, your resilience, your perseverance, you as a person getting to understand who you are and who you want to be.
So how was that for you? Like let's talk a little bit about like your
Mm.
story, that part of your story. Right here you are kind of faced with this big extreme challenge, right? And kind of out of the blue. And so you're young, you're here, you're thought you were going this way and now you're not. And what did that look like for you? Like how did that affect your mental health? What did you do about it? Let me hear it.
Worst day of my life.
Yeah.
Because like since I was 16, I wanted to take over the company. Like that's what I thought my trajectory in life was. And I was working towards it and I was working 12-hour days and I was trying to prove myself to everybody in the company because of course I'm boss's daughter,
Hmm.
right? So you got to work 3 times as hard or you think that you do, right? And I cried. That day I cried. I could not help myself. I was sobbing in the boardroom because I had just watched my dad, like,
Yeah.
talk to all these people, and all these people were out of a job, and we did everything that we could to try to save it. And one of our VPs, I remember, he went around telling everybody that I needed to see a psychiatrist.
Mm-hmm.
I needed a therapist because I was crying in that moment on that day. And that obviously did not help. That was like a kick in the butt when you're down. You know what I mean? Um, and so yeah, it was the worst day of my life. I think what helped me was that I had people who had paid to come on the show, and obligation is very important to me. So I really wanted to fulfill that obligation. And so it gave me a reason. I don't know if I want to use the word purpose, but it gave me a reason to get up in the morning.
Hmm.
I didn't have a lot to do, but I had a little bit to do. And
Yeah.
so instead of sitting on the couch crying, which I did a lot, and trying to figure out for myself what the next path looked like, I had this one tangible thing I could focus on.
Hmm.
And it took me 8 months to find a job too. Right. So at the same time that I'm like fulfilling the obligation, I'm trying to go through, and pretty much it was kind of grief, right? Like it had been 20 years of my life and what I thought my life would look like. I had to I had to work through all of that. I've had a therapist since my early 20s, so I always had one and I had one at the time. And so I think between all of that, it really helped me to push through it, but it took a while.
Yeah, I bet. When you were faced that in that 8 months, like maybe not just that day, but just kind of after that and kind of unpacking it all, where did how did you start to, you didn't, I'm sure you didn't identify it at the time, but later, but like when you look back now, where did you see the evidence of lack of self-worth or what your self-worth was, or even the idea of that? Where did that show up for you?
So I think that was just one moment in time. So what I talk about in the book is my relationship with self-worth based on my life experiences.
Hmm.
And so that was only one of the experiences. And so my self-worth throughout the years has, gained in clarity and then bottomed out and then came back up where I was able to find my voice in a variety of ways and then bottomed back out again. And I think that really is ideally the journey that most people go on, but we don't talk about it because, everybody wants to be like, everything's fine. I'm so confident. I know exactly what I'm doing. And the truth is, most of us don't, you know?
No.
And so in that moment, I mean, my self-worth was pretty much in the dumps because this thing happened and I felt responsible for it, even though it was not my responsibility. There was nothing I could have done differently to make anything any different. And
Hmm.
then it was like, well, what the hell am I going to do with the rest of my life?
Hmm.
I'm almost 37 years old. I'm 3 years from 40,
Hmm.
and I'm starting over again. And
Hmm.
I have to go find a job, and I've never been on an interview before.
Hmm. When you think back on that now, and like I like how you mentioned that it was just one moment, right? And I totally agree with
Mhm.
that. Like we are made up of all of the experiences, and even in my work, we someone might
Yeah,
come in with like a traumatic event, like a recent event, right? Like they're coming
yeah,
in because this accident happened or the situation, and that's fine. We obviously can talk about that. However, you didn't. None of us get here and are dealing with any situation in a vacuum. We have all of this whole life
yeah,
full of experiences, good, bad, ugly, that informed us up until then. So when you
yeah.
kind of look back on that now, were you able to see, and maybe even in your therapeutic process, like kind of unpack what were those kind of key components, those kind of core experiences and or beliefs about yourself that you were able to identify from your earlier experiences that like showed up in a big way in that one?
Yeah, I mean, I was triggered in all sorts of different ways, right? There was abandonment.
Hmm.
'Cause now I was like completely out on my own. There was no comfort blanket, no nothing. Like I had always had side hustles, but then I'd always had my job to fall back on,
Yeah.
right? Now it was like, okay, you need to pull up your socks because you're the only one that we can bet on right now.
Yeah.
And I don't know what that looks like. I don't know if you're going to go find a job. I don't know if you're going to make something out of this business. I don't know what that looks like.
Hmm.
But, we have to bet on you now, right? My husband had a job at the time. He eventually lost his job during COVID as well. So it was a lot. But
Yeah.
there was a ton of triggers and like looking back on it, um there was a way of life for a very long time of how I thought about things, how I saw things, and it completely deconstructed. I had to deconstruct it over a few years once that happened to
Yeah.
really find out who I was, who I wanted to be, how I wanted to show up. And it was now my turn to run a business the way I wanted to run it and what I wanted it to show up in the world and
Hmm.
how I wanted the business to make an impact in the world.
Yeah.
And that doesn't happen overnight because I had a
Oh,
lot of healing I had to go through. A
I
lot.
would love for you to say more about that because I really that's the part that I'm super curious about is the unpacking, right? Like what did you discover?
Yeah.
What was revealed to you?
Yeah. I had to, there was a lot of blame and shame.
Uh-huh.
There was a
Uh-huh.
lot of blame and shame, right? Because
Hmm.
it's your family, right?
Hmm.
And I was looking to be a face in an industry where this just happened in,
Hmm.
right? Like that is tough
Hmm.
because you don't know how you're going to be perceived. You don't know how they're going to take it. You don't know if anybody's going to listen to you but what I realized after some time was this was just a blip. It
Hmm.
was just a blip. It was a very, very massive event
Hmm.
for a lot of people. It was a
Yeah.
small group of people.
So what helped you to get there? I know you mentioned therapy, and obviously, I'm
Yes.
a big fan of that. I always recommend people find some outside help, and specifically some of the, more modern day approaches that really can tap into different parts of the brain work. But what did you do and like continue to do? And like, what are some of the things that the takeaways from that process now that
Man,
you literally utilize in your life, every day to kind of help
what
you?
didn't I do?
Hmm.
What didn't I do? I've tried everything. I'm kind of the person where I'd like to try different methods and then see if it works for me or not. At
Hmm.
least if it doesn't work, then like you said earlier, I know that it doesn't work for me and this is not something I want to pursue.
Sure.
So I did therapy. I did some hypnotherapy as well. I did some intuitive healing. I went to
Mhm.
a medium, some energy healing. So I'm very spiritual as well, and so I do believe in a lot of those things too. And so I've tried a bunch of that, and I've had some amazing sessions that really put things into perspective for me. One example I share in the book is that I went to an energy healer that was recommended to me. It was recommended to me, and then I don't think I went to her for like a whole year. I like had it written down. I was like, I'm gonna go, I'm gonna do it. It was not cheap. Like it was, she knew her value, right? Like, But there was so much clarity I got from that session in the fact that she told me that my personal life needed to be messy in order for me to create safe space for conversation, which is what I do
Mm,
through my blended podcast, the Let's Talk Supply Chain podcast. That's why for my personal brand, I didn't want to be a supply chain expert, not a supply chain expert,
right.
right? I'm not necessarily a self-worth expert either, but self-worth is tied into the impact and what I do in my superpower in creating safe space for conversation.
Mm,
And so when she said that, I was like, yes. Okay, so now the messiness and all the things I've been through is actually my superpower and allows me to create that safe space for conversation, helps other people feel seen and heard because I've got the empathy muscle in the fact that I've been through so many
mm,
things and I'm not going to tell them what to do. I'm just going to hear them out.
mhm. I love that so much. And also what's great about that realization is that I think secondarily and part of emotional maturity really is when we don't even have to share any of that. But
Mhm.
it's like in us and it's like more of a vibe thing, an energy thing.
Yeah.
So it's in us, we are like that, but we don't have to like share. We can share if we want, but we don't have to share that with everybody we talk to or even anybody for them to kind of feel that from us and to know that
Yeah.
we are a safe space for conversation, which I
Yeah.
think is such a big part of growth work, and realizing
Hmm.
that, a lot of times the less said, the better. And so we can become people who are very wise and have lots of life experiences, which have given us an incredible amount of wisdom, tolerance and knowledge. But um, we don't really have to share it all. Like we can really just hold space for that and be
Yes.
a safe person and a safe space and totally get it and be like, yes, I get that.
Yeah. Yeah.
Um, that's like
Yeah.
another level of personal growth, which I think a lot of people struggle with because generally, as human beings, I think we're just naturally self-centered, it
Well,
takes.
and there's a lot of things like you don't really want to face. Sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt, but like there's some things you just don't want to face. I don't want to face some of them, but once I understood my triggers,
Mhm.
it was a little bit easier to navigate life and be able to communicate. Whether the other person could take it or not is a
Yeah.
completely different story because their healing journey is very different to mine.
Hmm.
And so once you're on that healing journey and you start to understand more about yourself and where you are versus where other people are, it actually makes it a lot easier to navigate through communication, conversations, life,
Hmm.
because then you stop taking things so personally and holding it for your like on yourself because most of the stuff isn't yours to carry.
Well, right. And also, there's a real art, skill and I think perspective to being able to be the kind of person who can um, sit and receive somebody else's
Hmm.
stuff without feeling the need to like jump in and be like, oh yeah, well,
Right.
when my grandmother died, I remember how that felt. And it was almost like not even relatable. Instead of being, able to just be like, wow, that sounds really hard. Or man, you must be so sad. Or whatever, being able to validate and see and hear people. It's really all any of us really want anyway, by the way. Like
Yeah.
most of us just want to be seen and heard and validated.
Yeah.
But I think because of the self-centered nature of human beings in general, it takes a lot of like, I think discipline to not jump in and be like, oh yeah, I know what that's like, or when I was
Hmm.
doing blah, instead of just being like, wow, that's a lot.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah,
Mm,
it's true. It's, it's hard too, right? Because you're not perfect all the time. And so I do that sometimes.
of course. Yeah, we all
You
do.
know, we jump in and we're like, oh, I know what that feels like because I'm going through this and da 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 da. And then I'm
Mhm.
like, oh, wait a second. That moment was not about me.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Yeah, totally.
But that's the self-awareness that really comes through
Mhm.
some of the work and some of the hard work that you
Mhm.
have to do because none of this is easy, right? It wasn't easy. There was a lot of times where I was questioning myself. I was questioning what I was doing. I was like, What am I doing here? Is this the right path for me? Sometimes you've got the wrong people in your life and, that's not working out really well. And so there can be a lot going on at different times of your life. Some good, some bad, some ugly, some messy. But again, I think that that's sometimes life. And as long as we don't get too caught up in the negative, which is hard, right? You've got to be self-aware to be able to combat some of those negative thoughts that come in.
How do you do that? How do you combat the negative thoughts?
Man, that's hard. I just went through this. I think, when was it? Was it yesterday? I was having a really hard day yesterday. Like a really hard day yesterday. And I got sucked into it. And then other moments of the day, I was like, no, this is it for me today. This is where I want to live. This is what I want to feel. It's nobody else's. I didn't put it on anybody else. I didn't talk about it. I wrote some stuff down to get it
Mm-hmm.
out, but it really wasn't anybody else's responsibility but mine to like just sit with it
Yeah.
and be like, okay, you're like this today. It doesn't mean you have to be like that tomorrow. We're going to go to sleep like we usually do. We're going to wake up in the morning and it's a completely different day. But today, it's okay. You're feeling angry? Fine. As long as you're not taking it out on anybody.
Right. Yeah, I love that. I mean, we talk about this a lot and in the workout that I do too. It's just being able to like acknowledge, like naming things, like being able to name the feeling or the situation, acknowledge that it's happening. And so instead of just being like, oh, I'm fine. Like I'm fine, the
Right.
brushing it on, just really being able to become willing to say like,
Hmm.
no, I'm feeling really angry today, actually, or I'm super sad, or I really just I'm grieving, or I'm feeling a lot of anxiety, and I can feel it in my stomach, and my body is tight, and being
Yeah.
able to really get to the space where you can start to do that for yourself. And we are
Hmm.
responsible for that, by the way. You're so right. Like that personal responsibility piece is a huge value
Hmm.
of mine. And then being able to name that, acknowledge it, and then understand that the only way to get over it is to go through
Yeah.
go through it and to allow it to be. So we can't just like dismiss it. I mean, sometimes we do numb out, for short periods of time where we're just like, you know what? I just need to like scroll on my phone or whatever. We use a
Yeah.
coping skill. And sometimes we just need to cry it out,
Hmm.
and sometimes we don't have a choice. So we have to like go to work, or we have to, deal with the thing. But I think where there is time and space to be able to say, you know what, I'm going to allow this to happen, for this period of time. I always tell people like use your timers or whatever. Like you might say, I'm going to kind of cry about this or I'm going to complain, for 1 hour. I'm going to set my timer. And when the hour's up, I'm going to move on. I am going to like put this away, pack it up and move on. Or maybe till tomorrow. Tomorrow is a new day. We're no longer going to be wallowing around in this. We're going to get up, get showered and go to work or
Yeah.
whatever your day is.
So you just reminded me of yesterday. So I was obsessing. Like, you know how you're like in this, you have these things that are happening, right? You have conflict with somebody or, whatever. Anyways, I get a little bit obsessive in my head where I've like have conversations with
Mhm.
them because like I want to talk it out or whatever. And so I was obsessing a little bit about this conflict that I have in my life at the moment. And I was getting my legs waxed. And I just vented for 45 minutes and I cried a little bit. I don't know if she knew I was crying a little bit because it's just at the corner of my eyes. But like that's what yesterday looked like. And then I went to go and visit a family member with my husband and I knew I wasn't 100%, but that was okay. I sat there and they talked. And I just sort of like sat there and like,
Mhm.
put my 2 cents in where it was time for that to happen. And then, I went home and did some things that, I needed to do to just sort of sit there.
Yep.
So there was different moments in that day that I just want to point out. I left the waxing appointment. I was like, damn, like I really offended to this poor woman.
Yeah.
And I left and I was like, listen, man, I'm sorry. I just needed to vent. And she was like, no, no, it's all good. And
Yeah.
so I did that happened, I worked through it with her and then I walked out and I thought, okay, I've had that moment today. Let's work through the rest.
Right. And I think what's really, really important about what all of it is important, but one of the most important things that you said is that, you didn't leave any wreckage with anybody else. You
Mm.
didn't like lash out or say mean things, or you didn't ignore, the thing. You didn't even not go to the family member thing. Like there's just, so we have to be mindful about not creating more wreckage, when we are in
Yeah.
these moments. Yes, we're allowing ourselves the space. And sometimes we might need to say, you know what, I just can't show up for that today.
Yeah.
We can do that with a very respectful, tone and language. And that really
Mhm.
matters. That says a lot about our character and who we are. And
Yeah.
then it also is a lot of self-worth when we're honoring and respecting ourselves enough to know, like, what are we
Mhm.
able to do and what are we not able to do today?
Yeah.
But that's really important when we're managing conflict and communications, and also when we are sort of stepping into that space of self-worth, because we want to be a respectable person that doesn't do those things. Now, of
Hmm.
course, when we make the mistake, because we all will, we
Hmm.
have the ability to circle back and we make amends. We just say,
Yes,
you know what,
absolutely.
I should have done that better,
Yeah.
or I really didn't need to go there. I'm sorry.
Yeah.
And that's like always available to us.
Yeah.
We should do that when we make the mistake, but
Yeah.
where
I
we can be
picked,
mature, it's good.
yeah, I picked a word for this year. I usually pick a
Yeah.
word for each
Yeah.
year.
Yeah.
This year for me is a very different one. It's forgiveness.
Oh, nice.
And
Nice.
it's like forgiving myself for those moments that you were talking about,
Mhm.
where, you know what, we're going to revert back or we're going to get triggered or whatever that looks like. And I want to remind myself that it's okay and that I forgive myself in that moment,
Mhm.
right? But then
Yep.
also working on forgiving other people so that I can release
Yeah.
some of this stuff too.
Yeah,
You know,
totally.
because that's really important and it's so hard. I've been working on it for years. I mean,
It
let's
is.
just put it out there because
Yeah.
it is not easy.
Well, I don't think we ever stop working on this stuff. We don't
Yeah.
really arrive in life. We're always under construction. And I think as long as we are
Yes.
making that forward progress and we are
Hmm.
looking for opportunities to be better, to learn more, to kind of establish new ways of doing things, then it's a positive and everybody wins.
Yeah.
So listen, I want to say thank you so much for sharing your story and your time with us. If people want to get the book or reach out to you, how do you like them to do that?
Go to Amazon and search I Buried Her in a French Press. That is the title of the book. There's nothing else on Amazon that has that title.
Nice.
Instagram, Sarah Barnes Humphrey. Follow me on LinkedIn. We've also got sarahbarneshumphrey.com.
Perfect. Well, again, thank you so much for your time. And I hope our paths cross again. And best of luck with
Yes.
all the new shows and the book
Thank you.
and new endeavors, and keep in touch.